Hey guys, your captain is back.
Hey,
So it's time to continue our video series about fixing the Mario Kart retro tracks. We've gone through Mario Kart DS, Mario Kart Wii, Mario Kart 7, and now the last traditional retro section to fix is Mario Kart 8's. Just like Mario Kart 7, this retro selection is rather loved by fans, for one reason. Due to the massive overhauls that the tracks got, even a course that was originally just good or even mid could now become an S tier track. Why I decided to give the courses glow ups from the get go with Mario Kart DS, Nintendo waited until this game for some reason. But the wait was worth it, as some of these overhauls, like Piranha Plant Slide or Ribbon Road, are now fan favorites in the game, even though the original tracks weren't among the most popular ones in the series. However, there is still room for improvement. Most notably, while the tracks all got massive improvements, the actual choices are sometimes questionable. Weird priorities regarding the two games that preceded Mario Kart 8, tracks that didn't get a really big overhaul or one that was only visual when they very much needed a glow up gameplay wise as well, uneven distribution of tracks. The DLC kind of alleviated some of those issues by making the overhauls even more significant, but that's at the cost of other questionable choices. So yeah, this retro selection is definitely gonna need fixing as well. And that's cool, because this is precisely what we're here for today. But before we start, I'll add some ground rules, as usual. I'm not allowed to remake a track that I already picked in an earlier video from the series. I must keep some diversity in the themes, and I'm not allowed to put two tracks from the same game in the same cup. However, I will also fix the Wii U DLC's retros, which you'll discover between the Banana Cup and the Leaf Cup, and you'll discover that I changed the rules a bit for this DLC. But for now, let's start with the Shell Cup. Let's go! Let's start with the Shell Cup. This one's a real bummer because it had a lot of potential. It starts with Wee Moo Moo Meadows, which is a pretty good track on its own, even though we'll see that it was a really weird choice for Wii standards. This version still gave it a good go up, with the gorgeous sunrise, the more appealing color palette and detailed scenery, and even a glider section that makes the last part way less tedious to play. But then it de-escalates. GBA Mario Circuit started from a cool idea, but it's not enough. The main attraction of this remake is that giant piece of land, lifted by an Ultra Hand. You know, one of the first toy Nintendo made when they quit making cards and started making toys. However, in the end, it's so short that it loops back from being the same old flat track with improved graphics. And since that in the original track there was practically nothing of value, this really feels like Nintendo had time constraints to give us a better remake of this track.
and to think that everyone kept voting for it online whenever it showed up. This is why you don't let little Timmy play with the Switch without supervising him.
Worse, this is the only GBA track in the Wii U base game. Tracks like Bowser Castle 4, Lakeside Park, Cheap Cheap Island, or even Yoshi Desert are still begging for a massive overhaul as of today, but Nintendo went for the simplest track they had in store, which is such a bummer to me. Fortunately, the cup then picks up again with DS Cheap Cheap Beach. While it's far from being the best Mario Kart DS track, it's still a pretty enjoyable course. The relaxing atmosphere and beautiful scenery makes the whole track feel like a vacation, which I really love. However, it then goes downhill in the worst way possible. The fourth and final track is N64 Toad's Turnpike. The original was pretty good, with a cool psychedelic atmosphere and true challenge. However, this version is just so boring. It's so easy that you basically just end up playing Figure 8 Circuit, and the theme or scenery aren't enough to save this train wreck. Seriously, it ends the cup on such an underwhelming note because it's easily the easiest track in the whole cup. So yeah, this cup had good ideas, notably its more laid back and chill feeling, but due to its two really bad tracks, it all fell apart. And in a way, trying to still stay laid back with the last track ended up causing another one of its challenges, because usually in a cup like this, you'd expect the final track to amp up the stakes. So I'm going to fix it by trying to start off with simple but more packed tracks and to end off with the first fan favorites of this retro selection. So people who watched all the videos in this series will certainly understand what the first track is and the reasoning behind it. Basically, I had the idea of starting the Rainbow Road pattern way earlier in Mario Kart's DS by putting SNES Rainbow Road in DS and 64 Rainbow Road in Wii and so on so forth, each one being the final track of the Lightning Cup. However, I also decided to do the same with the starter tracks of each Mario Kart game, putting each one at the start of the Shell Cup with SNES Mario Circuit 1 in DS and 64 Luigi Raceway in Wii and so on, so forth. This retro selection is the fourth one in the series,
Super Circuit's extra tracks don't exist.
and Mario Kart Double Dash on GameCube was the fourth game. Therefore, GC and Luigi Circuit is going to start our new Shell Cup. That's already a much better simple circuit track to have than GBA Mario Circuit, because unlike many blander circuits, GC and Luigi Circuit is actually really fun on its own. The fact that players can drive on either side of the main road in the middle of the track is actually really clever, because since you can actually face the other players, you can mess the game up with a blue shell, hit a maximum of people with a bomb, or just be an absolute piece of shit and throw a shell at the player in the last place. However, this course is still going to need an overhaul. This way, if someone plays the Shell Cup before the Mushroom Cup, they will be able to have an overview of the different mechanics in Mario Kart 8. First, instead of taking place on a random circuit in a countryside, this course will take place in an urban area to make it feel more alive. Then, both of the two big curvy turns will now be in anti-gravity and they will be covered in boost panels. They both end with a choice you can make. You can either go back on the middle road with a small ramp or glide above it with this glider ramp. This is still a very simple track, but it's already a way better circuit than GBA Mario Circuit because it actually has creative ideas in the gameplay and does a better revamp than just modifying a tiny fraction of the track. To follow on this, I figured out that it was logical to continue on the beach track, but since I decided to use a bit less DS tracks than the base game to make room for games that were, in my opinion, underrepresented in Mario Kart 8, I didn't want to use cheap beach. Since we had less slot for DS tracks in the base game, this would have been a wasted slot. Instead, I decided to give a go up to a course that really needs it, SNES Cooper Beach 1. Despite being a star cup in the original Super Mario Kart game, Cooper Beach 1 wouldn't work this late in the retro selection. Originally, it was a hard track because the adhesion of the road made it harder to stay on it since Super Mario Kart has a flat track gameplay and a huge emphasis on slippery roads. However, in Mario Kart 8, sand typically doesn't have that level of adhesion, making the track just a circle. However, we can't make this course as hard as it once was in Mario Kart 8, but we can still give it a go up to make it more fun, engaging, and varied than it would otherwise become with a remake. The track starts normally, but when you get off the first island, you jump in water. Since Water Park is the second track in the Mushroom Cup, I thought it would be logical that the retro track that introduces underwater driving is also the second track of the Shell Cup. However, we will keep this underwater section very simple. It could have some geysers you can trick off from, and some cheap chips as well. This part could also be in anti-gravity, so it can be tilted a bit. You then exit this underwater section to go on a boat, also exiting the anti-gravity section in the process. Then, you turn right to glide on a muddy jungle island. Here, you have to avoid landing on the mud, which will cost you a lot of time. You can trick off from the ruined piers on this island. After this, you turn right to glide off the island and end the lap. This course would still be simple, but with its varied landscapes and more obstacles, it would already be way more packed and fun than it used to be. Out of all the fan favorite tracks that were omitted and weird priorities for the game, one of the most absurd ones for me was how they didn't include Shy Guy Bazaar in the game as the Desert Retro. I'll never understand why they picked GC and Dry Desert instead to represent the desert theme. Dry Ruins from Mario Kart Wii, and Shy Guy Bazaar from Mario Kart 7. The most recent desert tracks in the series at that point were both tracks that got really popular among fans as opposed to the mostly polarizing or even hated earlier desert tracks. Yet they decided to not only pick Dry Desert, which is often considered one of the weakest tracks in Double Dash, but they didn't even try to improve on it. As for the 3DS tracks, while Melody Motorway was a logical pick as it was already a fan favorite at the time, Piranha Plant Side and DK Jungle just track as really weird choices for priority retros. Like, these are both really good or even great tracks, but would you really prioritize them over Shy Guy Bazaar or the Woohoo tracks? Yeah, I'd get it if it was in DLC or in the next game. But having them as priority retros without having at least one of the three aforementioned tracks was just ridiculous.
Ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous.
Shy Guy Bazaar would be the third track of my Shell Cup. It wouldn't fit if it was placed further than the first half of the Banana Cup, but at the same time, it's already a bit too complex to be in the first half of the Shell Cup, as with a more exotic theme, a more complex layout, and more obstacles than the two previous tracks, it's more climactic than Cooper Beach 1 or Ouija Circuit. So having it as a penultimate track of the Shell Cup instead is a good way to amp up the stakes before the final track replaces the bar for difficulty higher is a good move. This track won't receive as many modifications as Cooper Beach 1, but it will still be tweaked enough as a way to profit from Mario Kart 8's mechanics. First, with anti-gravity, you will be able to go on the walls near the bridges at the start of the track. This path is longer, but it has speed boosts. Then, the 3 turns you take right after will now take place on the walls of houses you go through with anti-gravity. You use ramps to go from one house to the other, and those birds from Super Mario Bros. 2 will also try to attack you. Then, the final part of the track will be in an oasis, with a small shortcut you can take with a mushroom to jump above the pond. This track would still retain what made it amazing in Mario Kart 7, but with the anti-gravity and more varied scenery, it would be even more engaging than its original version. Okay, for the last track, I'm gonna rant a bit. The way this retro selection handled the Wii tracks was, let's say it, ridiculous.
Utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, Grookey, we understood it the first time. Grumble Volcano, which was the third track in the Lightning Cup, is cool, but I don't think many Mario Kart Wii fans are gonna choose it over Bowser's Castle, DK Summit, Toad's Factory, or Dry Ruins. Then, Moo Moo Meadows is just what? This was the second most recent game at that point in the series, and Nintendo already brought back one of the simplest tracks in the game, and maybe even the series for its Wii representation. I understand bringing simple track-free games after its debut installments back, but the gap of one game in between their iterations is way too small for Moo Moo Meadows. Instead, I'm going to prioritize a retro track that frankly should have been a no-brainer for Mario Kart 8. I'm honestly baffled at how Nintendo took about 17 years to bring this course back for the first time. I'm of course talking about Toad's Factory. Honestly, this course should have been in Mario Kart 8, and I could even see it be a priority retro in Mario Kart 7. But regardless, not including it over Moo Moo Meadows is just stupid, especially when your cup ender is Toad's fucking Turnpike. A Shell Cup ender should feel climactic, being a level up in difficulty and the most ambitious track yet, to tell the players that things are gonna be harder, but also more ambitious from now on. For the changes I'd give to this track, well, since it's already a fan favorite, I'd rather not tweak it too much, but I'll still change it enough so it feels fresh. On this contraption, you can perform a shortcut if you manage to orient your tricks well enough. If you do so, you can roll on a bridge above the conveyor belt room. The second room with a conveyor belt will undergo two main changes. First, it will be in anti-gravity. Then, it will be filled with slime that you'll fall in if you're not careful. You will exit the anti-gravity section when entering the room with the alarms. Finally, the last jump will be guided section, and if you manage to perform a trick on this air current, then you can go on the small cliff and glide again above the mud section, although you'll need a mushroom for that. The course would be the perfect way to end the Shell Cup. It's the hardest track in the game yet, it's chaotic, it has a wacky theme, it's a fan favorite, and it's not changed too much, but just enough so that you still feel that you're playing a new version of the track. In short, the perfect ending track for a beginner cup. And that's the Shell Cup finished. Originally a half good, half garbage cup, this cup turned into what could possibly be the best Shell Cup in the series if it was a reality, and easily the Shell Cup that I'm the most proud of for this series. Starting with simple but fun tracks, then leveling up with fan favorite tracks that are still easy, but that already amp up the stakes, the difficulty, and the ambition. Next on our list is the Banana Cup. So this cup is really underwhelming. The problem with this one is that its two opening tracks are so simplistic that this could really be a Shell Cup and I wouldn't notice. Dry Desert is just a watered down version of what was already one of the least ambitious Mario Kart Double Drive tracks, and Donut Plains 3 literally took one of the hardest Super Mario Kart tracks and removed everything that made it difficult, leaving you with just grass.
Nintendo, we're not League of Legends players. We already touched grass in real life.
Royal Raceway is already way better, and I could have almost kept it, but spoiler alert for a potential video, I'd actually save this one for the Booster Course Pass, so it can have a changing laps gimmick where you go in the castle in lap 2 to do the final lap backwards. Finally, DK Jungle is just a weird choice. It's a good course, sure, and it looks way better than on the 3DS in glorious HD, but it's clearly not a course I'd choose as a priority retro track over Macau Woohoo, Shy Guy Bazaar, Wario's Galleon, or even Toad Circuit, baby! And I think it's just a weird way to end the cup. If I kept it, I would have put it somewhere in the first half of the Eve Cup instead. It's just too complex for a banana cup, even though I understand the logic of bananas equals DK, but hey, leaves equals jungles and forests. And overall, I just think this cup feels too calm. I don't know how to explain this, but while a chill first cup is logical, I just think the second cup should amp up the stakes, just like the Wii Banana Cup does. Instead, the tracks almost feel as laid back as what you could find in a mushroom cup or a shell cup. So I'm gonna revamp this banana cup entirely with tracks that actually deserve to be prioritized at this point and that are also more ambitious and climactic than what we got. The first track in this cup is going to be a circuit, as you probably expected. This way, we can get the token Mario circuit of the retro section out of the way before moving on to more ambitious tracks and actual fan favorites for good. Royal Raceway would fit better in the Booster Course Pass due to its lap-changing potential with the castle. But however, I am not opposed to having another raceway track for Mario Kart 64 in the base game too. And since I already used Luigi Raceway in Mario Kart Wii's fixed retro section, the logical solution is Mario Raceway. This track is quite simple,
Duh, it's a circuit track.
but it's still among the better circuits. It actually made efforts to have its scenery stand out, has a layout that's a bit more engaging than many Mario circuit tracks, and also has quite the potential for a good glow up, with anti-gravity and maybe even some underwater driving. Here's how I would improve it. You start the track by going on a road with anti-gravity that's above a bottomless pit, Peach Stadium style. Here, you can perform a couple of cool grass shortcuts, but you also have to be careful not to fall off. Then, you exit the anti-gravity section, and after one other turn, you jump in the water. You can go on the normal path underwater, or roll on the spinning mushroom to take a shortcut. After this, you jump in the pipe in anti-gravity again, a bit like in Warp Pipe Canyon.
Someday, guys. Someday.
You first speed down the first slope, then you have to roll on a waterfall to avoid getting pushed in the pits by the currents. You pass near a piranha plant and you have to avoid its fiery breath. Then, you speed out of the pipe and of the anti-gravity section to turn right and end the lap. Just like DS Mario Circuit's remake in the Booster Course Path, this will be the perfect way to turn a basic, simple circuit track into something that's quite mundane, but already way more varied and engaging than what we originally had. The next track is a course that originally was in Mario Kart 7's retro section, but that I pushed back to Mario Kart 8 as it had no slot where it could fit in nicely without feeling anticlimactic and have an appropriate difficulty for set slots due to other tracks that were already filling the Mario Kart 7 retro slots where it could have fit. That track is GCN Daisy Cruiser. Now, I always thought having it as a penultimate track of the Leaf Cup in Mario Kart 7 was kind of weird. This course has a layout that's complex enough to not be in the Shell Cup, but to put it in the second half of the Leaf Cup is just pushing it. I would understand if it was the opening track, but we're talking about the third track here. So I'm gonna put it here as the second track of the Banana Cup instead, to amp up the stakes to more complex fan favorite track after the simpler Mario Raceway. As for the overhaul this track would get, it'd be mostly visual, by adding more toads and making the cruise ship feel more alive in general, a bit akin to what the Booster Course Pass gave us. However, I also changed a couple of areas gameplay wise too. First, not only can you go under the water of the pool, but you can also trick off from a pool toy on it. Then, the left path at the start of the track will be in anti-gravity, as you roll on the walls and windows of the cruise ship. Finally, you could maybe have a small dance party platform at the end of the track, with the bouncy music notes that you have to avoid. This course would be a great follow-up for Mario Raceway, with its more complex layout, but still laid-back atmosphere, teasing us for what's coming up next. The next track in the Banana Cup shares its logic with Daisy Cruiser. It was a track that was originally in Mario Kart Wii's retro section, and due to slot problems, but also the idea of having this track in glorious HD, I decided to push it back to Mario Kart 8. This track is DS Delfino Square, one of my favorite tracks of all time, and my favorite Mario Kart DS course as well. This track is the pinnacle of having a course that shines with its theme. It's the perfect mix of the warm feeling of summer and the fresh feeling of the fall.
Um, Care to explain more about this?
Basically, it has this cozy feeling of a walk in the park during the fall or the spring, but at the same time, it manages to have a really uplifting vacation feeling, which is a mix of vibes that works so well with the music that manages to feel laid back and energetic at the same time. A layout that can be simple at first glance, but still has its share of complex moments and shortcuts that can be very difficult to take, and a relatively warm color palette contrasting with the clear blue sea in the background. I love how the whole track is literally made to convey such a cool mix of vibes, both upbeat and cozy, and I think this course would look straight up amazing in HD. However, with Mario Kart 8's added mechanics since Mario Kart DS, we could also make it more complex in terms of gameplay as well, which would make this track even better. Here's how I would improve Delfino Square. First, the part just after the fountain would now be in sewers. At first, you are surrounded by walls, making it easy, but afterwards, you must be careful not to fall off in a pit. This whole sewer section could be a twisty anti-gravity section with roads tilted to 90 degrees. Then, the next part is also a bit different. You can take the normal path by going underwater, but the shortcut works differently. You must take it with a mushroom and manage to land on the green boat to trick off from it and land on the road again. Finally, the drawbridge will now have a glider ramp when it's lifted high enough. This course will be really fun to play in Mario Kart 8. With its vibes that's cozy and upbeat at the same time, its improved gameplay and graphics that would really honor this track's atmosphere.
Also, Boom once had a dream where Delfino Square was a city track based on Nantes, which is a coastal city in western France. You can call it Nantes Harbor if you want.
So originally, the final track of this cup was DK Jungle. I think it's okay for a finale, but it has a couple of problems. First, it's kind of weird to have this as the gas track of a cup, but I can get behind that problem at the absolute limit. The second thing is that it's a bit too complex for a banana cup track, and while it's not special cup worthy either, I think the first half of the Leaf Cup would fit this track better if I had to bring it back. But the biggest problem is that this track isn't a worthy priority retro. Once again, there's a whole bunch of Mario Kart 7 tracks that I prioritize over this one. However, I actually like the idea of putting a DK track in a banana cup, as bananas will be associated with DK. And I think the best one to end this cup is DK Summit from Mario Kart Wii. This is actually my second favorite track of all time, only topped by Wii Rainbow Road.
which is 20% cooler than DK Summit.
And to me, among the DK tracks that were available at the time, this is easily the one that fits the best as the final track of a cup. It's got energetic and climactic music, a sports setting that truly gives you the championship feel, and a fun layout that really works as a way to test your skill for the halfway mark of the base game retro selection. And honestly, with the way it manages to capture the essence of snowboarding so well despite having to be easier than a Star or Special Cup track to fit the Flower Cup, it should have been remade in the base game from the get-go instead of having to wait until the Booster Course Pass's fourth wave. However, since Mario Kart 8's base game doesn't have half pipes, we're gonna have to reimagine the track to make it work with anti-gravity.
You hear that, Warriors Gold Mine?
So the first part with half pipes will be replaced by a part with anti-gravity on the cliffs of the mountains. You have to roll at 90 degrees while avoiding snowballs and boulders. However, the second part with half pipes will be changed considerably. It will be in a giant spinning log in anti-gravity, a bit like in 3DS Rainbow Road, except you can go around it at 180 degrees and do loop-de-loops around it. You will have to avoid falling in the pits. Yes, you can still perform the shortcuts, and Shy Guys, you will be snowboarding all around that icy wheel. There are also speed boosts all over that part. This track would be a perfect way to pick an already amazing fan favorite course from Mario Kart Wii and completely readapt it to Mario Kart 8's mechanics by making it different without making it feel like the Tamu version of the track.
You hear that, Sunset Wilds?
Now that we are halfway through the base game retro selection, I think it's the right time to talk about the retro tracks in the original Mario Kart 8 DLC. The rules for this one are gonna be a bit different than for the base game. This is because for the DLC only, I'm allowed to add some tracks that I already used in previous videos, just like the actual DLC did. As such, I added a rule. I have to put 3 retro tracks that were already remade. No more, no less. Then, just like in the DLC, all cups have 2 retros and 2 nitros. And yes, Excite Bike Arena gets executed as well. Now that this is clearer, let's start that DLC. For the Egg Cup, the only retro track was Yoshi's Circuit, which is actually a great track and one that I want to keep. However, due to what the other track is, I thought it'd fit better as the second track, not the first one. So I moved Yoshi Circuit to the second slot to leave the first one available for an improved version of SNES Donut Plane 3. I know I roasted its remake a while ago, but the original course was one of the more unique SNES tracks, being the only one with the mandatory jump, having a wide variety of things to worry about, from water to slippery ground, and just being one of the most difficult tracks in the game in general.
Well, duh, it's the special cup.
And I believe that with an actual revamp that goes further than just making the track prettier, we could actually make this course a worthy introduction for the DLC. First, after the first bridge, you get on the Grey Rock Mountain where you have to avoid boulders that are falling. Then, when you get to the next bridge, you have a section where you have to jump from one lily pad to another. After this, you enter a small castle. You have a small garden section with a chain jump to avoid before you climb to the summit of the castle to glide and end the lap. I believe that this course would honor the Donut Plains tracks much better with such a glow up. As for Yoshi Circuit, which will now be the second track, I leave this one as it is. This is a pretty strong remake that will make the track way less boring than the original by giving it a much prettier scenery and a more appealing color palette, making it more than just a gimmicky track with no meat on the bone. The only thing I change is that we bring the tunnel shortcut back, because I see no reason for abandoning it. For the Triforce Cup, this is gonna be a bit quicker, because none of the two tracks I chose actually need a huge revamp, although none of the tracks here that were originally in the cup will be here now. Because Wii Wario's Gold's Mine feels kinda off in this spot despite being a refund track, and SNES Rainbow Road is... yeah.
I agree that this pick could be 20% cooler.
So for the first slot, I'm going to put another Wii track, Moonview Highway. If the cars can go faster than in the remake we got in the Booster Course Pass, or if the road is tighter instead, this could really be an amazing track with Mario Kart 8's HD graphics from the base game. And maybe the two paths on the side of the road could be in anti-gravity. This track works as well as a way to amp up the stakes for the DLC, by having a tracks with a simple theme but a higher level of difficulty with all the cars moving fast. Then, the second track will be 3DS Melody Motorway. While I wanted to prioritize Shy Guy Bazaar and another track that we'll see later for the base game, I think Melody Motorway should be included somewhere in the game too, and the DLC is perfect for that. I honestly think that it's a perfect remake. Since this was already a fan favorite track that's packed with various elements, it didn't need many changes, but the few changes it had are just enough to make it an improvement over the original version of the track. The Crossing Cup originally had GCN Baby Pork and GBA Cheeseland. It's not too bad, but it could need some changes. Especially Baby Pork, which is probably the laziest choice Nintendo could have made. So the first track of the Crossing Cup can instead be N64 DK's Jungle Parkway. Since I scrapped it for my Mario Kart Wii fixing video, I have still yet to remake this track, so I think now's the right time, especially since it could look gorgeous in HD with this soothing sunset, especially if it could have an actual musical theme instead of a 15 seconds long loop. Here's the glow up I think it could have. I first did the obvious thing and turned the big jump into a glider section, except that when you end it, you land on the water. This section takes place in a big underwater canyon with tight walls and aggressive fish to avoid. After this, you get on a twisty bridge in anti-gravity, Vancouver Velocity style, where you have to take tight turns and jump from bridge to bridge. You then jump from it to enter a temple, a bit like in 3DS DK Jungle, except that in this one, the banana in it could actually be a security system that starts attacking the players with lasers once you approach it. You then exit the temple and the anti-gravity section to end the lap. The next track could be 3DS Wario's Carry On. At this point, we cross the halfway mark of the DLC, so a track with darker atmosphere is a perfect way to show that this second wave isn't gonna be easy as the first one. And honestly, we don't even need to change this one either apart from a graphic improvement. The only change I make is to add anti-gravity to that one turn, but otherwise, this track can almost have an entirely faithful remake. The Bell Cup is gonna be way faster to fix. This was an amazing cup, and honestly, I could have just left it as is. Because not enough that the two Nitros are among my favorite tracks of all time, the retro picks, 3DS New Bowser City and GBA Ribbon Road, are both great tracks. However, I'm kinda bummed that I couldn't include the Mario Kart 8 remake of DS TikTok Clock in my base game because I already used it in Mario Kart Wii. So there we go. GBA Ribbon Road is now the first track, followed by the Mario Kart 8 remake of DS TikTok Clock. None of the two tracks need to get any changes from how they were in Mario Kart 8, because honestly, those are both perfect remakes. But overall, I think I managed to make this DLC better with more consistent picks and more climactic ones, while removing the really problematic picks. However, honestly, looking back on this, I'd say this is one of the fixes that would be were the least necessary, because Nintendo really outdid themselves in making amazing remakes for the retro tracks, Even the bad picks have solid revamps, especially the bell cop like Rigi. This should not go as hard as it did. But now that this DLC fixing is over, we can go back to the base game retro cups. And the next cup is the Leaf Cup. Now, unlike the Shell and Banana Cups, I think this one was honestly pretty solid to begin with. DS Wario Stadium, GC and Sherbet Land, 3DS Melody Maltway, and N64 Yoshi Valley aren't necessarily among my favorite tracks of all time, but they're all good at worst, with nice revamps given to each of them. However, I still have some qualms with it. DS Wario Stadium shouldn't be the first track of the Leaf Cup, because it's honestly really hard for the first half of that cup, and honestly, harder than most of the courses that come after this one in the retro section. Then, we also have to remove GC and Sherbet Land, not because it was a bad choice, but because with the Skating Shy Guys, it would clash with Bui DK Summit. Next, since I moved 3DS Melody Maltway to the DLC, we can't use it here either. And finally, I'd move Yoshi Valley a little earlier in the cup, since I really don't feel like it will make for a good finale to the penultimate cup with that happy-go-lucky atmosphere.
At least it's Sunset, or Twilight, or Fluttershy, or Pinkie Pie, or Rarity.
So instead, I think the start of this cup is the right moment to use another Wii fan favorite that I deliberately pushed back from Mario Kart 7 to here so it could have anti-gravity. And this Wii fan favorite is none other than Coupe Cape. Yes, in Mario Kart 7, I decided to remove this track because I'm dismayed for too many Wii tracks when Mario Kart 7 literally follows Mario Kart Wii, and the appearance of underwater driving literally forces it to flood the tube, also ruining the experience by making the track too easy, especially since it's in the Lightning Cup, which with all those changes doesn't fit that track that was already a bit too easy to be so late in the game. However, it would fit perfectly in Mario Kart 8 at the start of the Leaf Cup, because it would be the perfect occasion to add some actual anti-gravity to the tube.
Because sorry, but no, I don't consider this an actual use of anti-gravity when absolutely nothing is done with it.
So in my revamp, since Mario Kart 8's base game doesn't have half pipes, we're going to have to replace those with other anti-gravity sections that could benefit from the mountain scenery of the track. First, instead of half pipes, this section will be in anti-gravity and go on the cliff, so you have to avoid the boulders. Then, before going on the river, you have the choice between jumping normally and gliding. After this, the anti-gravity section ends, but the big change would be the pipe. The whole pipe is in anti-gravity, and the electric currents would be brought back. The middle section of that pipe will undergo a change. It will be outside of the water in a partially broken tube with a piranha plant spitting fireballs you have to avoid. Then, at the end, the waterfall will be in anti-gravity, and you have no choice but to roll on it, meaning you have to orient yourself well so you don't end up falling down the waterfall. You then leave the anti-gravity section to end the track. This would be a much better way to honor Cooper Cape than all of the remakes we actually had, by keeping the roller coaster feeling of the track and still making it feel like a true adventure all the way through. Maybe we could also scale down the whole track, because that's actually a really good idea, and I swear that's the only good idea that the Boost to Coast Pass remake had. The next track is going to be a Super Mario Kart track. One thing I noticed in Mario Kart retro track selections is that SNES picks are often weird, and that many course themes of Super Mario Kart are often underrepresented. Like, look at this. 3 of the Mario circuits are here in 3 games, but Ghost Valley, which has a much more unique theme, doesn't even have more than 1 iteration on the Wii that doesn't even try to give an actual rhythm to the track. And since this theme deserves way better, I think it's a good time to put the best iteration of it in the Leaf Cup. Ghost Valley 3. This track is surprisingly complex for a Super Mario Kart track, with holes in the wood that you have to avoid on an already tight road, a nice feather shortcut, and some surprisingly difficult turns. I think this track could get a great revamp in Mario Kart 8. Here's how I would make it. You start on a grassy field with walking trees to avoid and a roundabout. You then get on a dark rocky canyon that you climb in anti-gravity. The shortcut would now involve tricking, and once again there are boulders falling.
You probably noticed that Rhythm loves boulders falling.
After this, you go into dark forest with branches you have to avoid and holes that opened up in the ground. You then jump on the water. A moray eel is trying to attack you and you have to avoid its bites. You then glide towards the finish line to end the gap, and there is also a shortcut involving a small air current. I think this would be great representation of how grown-ups can turn a Super Mario Kart track that doesn't fit other Mario Kart games controls into a memorable, varied, and engaging track for Mario Kart 8. The next track of the Eve Cup is going to be N64 Yoshi Valley. This was originally the final track, but I feel like its happy-go-lucky atmosphere with the friendly Yoshis and the joyful music fits better as the penultimate track instead, as a sort of calm before storm, just like how it preceded Banshee Boardwalk in its original iteration in Mario Kart 64. Given the track that is going to come after this one, it's honestly a good idea to sandwich this happy-go-lucky track between two tracks with a more ominous, chaotic atmosphere, as a way to lighten the mood before the big attraction of the cup. But with its maze-like layout, it's still difficult and unique enough to keep you on your toes for what's coming up next. However, I don't think this track needs a go-up. Its maze-like layout is what made it unique originally, and with the visual improvements and the stuff they added like the giant cannon or the cave, I think Nintendo remade it appealing enough for it to still feel fresh compared to its original version. I just told you that Yoshi Valley was made to be calm before the storm to lighten the mood before the serious final track. This is because the finale of the Eve Cup is going to be an overhauled version of GBA Bowser Castle 4. Among the 4 Bowser Castle tracks of Mario Kart Super Circuit, this is easily the one that has the most potential for a significant glow up, and the best one too. This is the longest Super Circuit track, with various obstacles in spite of a flat layout, from the big jump, to the Mecha Koopas, to the metal bridges and potholes of lava. It's clear that the developers wanted this track to be a real test of skills before Rainbow Road, as this is the track that originally followed it in Mario Kart Super Circuit. So I think it would be amazing to have this as a finale to the Leaf Cup, as a test of skills to prepare you for the Lightning Cup. Plus, it could mirror the Star Cup perfectly. Both end with a complex track that is long and focused on a villainous character while being different, as Mount Wario is cold and GBA Bowser Castle 4 is hot. All of this to say, it would be the perfect cup ender for the Eve Cup. Here's how I would improve it. You start the track outside of the castle in a volcanic wasteland. You turn left to enter the castle, then you go through a broken wall.
Because Bowser's too lazy to call people to fix this, I guess.
You enter a room filled with traps that is a sort of prison with a lot of lava holes and wires. Then, you enter a room made for Bowser's personal spectacles in anti-gravity. A fire Koopa count car is breathing fire that you have to avoid as you spin on a long, twisty turn. Several types of Mario enemies are watching you from the bleachers in the middle of the room. You then go outside of the castle in a tube that goes in lava. Once again, you have to avoid several potholes and also choose a path where the road divides in two. Then, you jump on rocks as you have to avoid pinballs that are falling down the road. You re-enter the castle from the window by gliding, and the first room has you fly above the lava while avoiding fireballs. You then enter Bowser's invention room, as you must avoid electric towers and manage your turns well to not fall into the abyss. You then go for another broken wall. You exit the castle through the other door to end the gap. This would be the perfect way to amp up the stakes to prepare you for the Lightning Cup, by making the player even more excited to discover what the final cup will have in store for them after this already very climactic Bowser Castle track. With those changes, we turned the cup that was the epitome of good but not great and kinda forgettable into a really great cup that balances upbeat tracks with ominous chaotic ones perfectly, with more memorable courses, a higher level of difficulty, and a more climactic track order overall. This takes us to the final retro cup, the Lightning Cup. Now, the original one is often revered by fans, and I like it quite a lot. It has DS TikTok Cock, which is not only a fan favorite, but also got a giant overhaul in Mario Kart 8. Then, we continue with 3DS Piranha Plant's Guide, which got an amazing remake with realistic graphics to fit Mario Kart 8, although I think the cartoony aesthetic from Mario Kart 7 fit its theme better, and a much more fun and climactic underwater section that actually uses anti-gravity to its fullest potential. We Grumble Volcano is already a pretty good track, but the graphics enhance it by giving it a whole new atmosphere solely by changing the color of the skybox from an ominous purple to a hellish red. And N64 Rainbow Road, while a bit too short and basic compared to other Rainbow Roads, is still a great improvement over what was originally one of the worst tracks of all time in its celebratory atmosphere, beautiful carpet, and new types of obstacles. However, I still have a pocket full of qualms about this cup.
Because Reboom is not like other girls.
First, TikTok Cock was a track that I already remade and I fixed Mario Kart Wii, forcing it to be in the DLC instead. And even if I didn't, I just think it fits weirdly in the Lightning Cup. Then, Piranha Plant Slide is a track that, in my opinion, was remade a bit too early. It's a good track, but it's not one I would revamp in priority compared to many other Mario Kart 7 courses. Same for Grumble Volcano. There are still too many Moe fan favorites I haven't remade yet that I pick rather than this one. Even though I like it, I know many people hate this track due to its chaotic nature and very high difficulty that can be brutal the first time you play it, and I'd rather prioritize other fan favorites before this track. Finally, since I remade N64 Rainbow and Mario Kart we would revamp earlier, we're gonna have to axe this one too. So let's start this final cup with a track that was originally in the Eve Cup, but that I pushed back to the Lightning Cup due to its difficulty. And this track is gonna be Wario Stadium from Mario Kart DS. I've always found that putting this track at the very start of the Eve Cup was weird, because it's way harder than the other Eve Cup tracks, and honestly, at least on par with the Lightning Cup courses. So making this one the first one in the Lightning Cup makes sense. It was already the first course in Mario Kart DS's Special Cup, and that while very hard, the track still has a basic staging theme, as opposed to the more climactic themes the courses that come next will have. And for the changes, I just put the remake we got in Mario Kart 8 as it is, maybe changing the day to night or sunset, but that's all. This remake perfectly reinvented the track while keeping all of its obstacles with its amazing anti-gravity section and the cool underwater section with a glider ramp at the end. A hard track like this would be the perfect way to show that we're not playing around anymore and that we're approaching the finale. So as I said, since Grumble Volcano isn't really a good priority for the second game to feature Wii tracks in retro selection, I decided to completely axe it for this game. However, I'm not opposed to having a track with a volcanic/lava theme that's not a Bowser's Castle, except there is another track that has similar obstacles with a more unique combination of themes and that was waiting to be remade for way too long now, considering it's a fan favorite among Mario Kart Super Circuit fans. I am of course talking about Lakeside Park. This is easily one of the most ambitious tracks in Mario Kart Super Circuit, and in a way, it's surprising that a track like this is completely flat, and yet it still manages to be so packed with different fun and engaging themes. First, this track has a very complex layout, with a lot of extremely difficult shortcuts, a wide array of different types of twists and turns, and even a trap ramp. But it also changes after the second lap. When you finish the first one, clouds roll in, and volcano in the background erupts. It shoots meteorites on the track, creating another hazard to worry about. And with the lake, jungle, and volcano themes combined, this could be one of the most rich and grand glow-ups a track could get in Mario Kart 8. Perfect for the Lightning Cup, especially if it gets to keep its original layout and not what the tour gave us instead.
This is what we call a Sky Garden Infection AU.
So instead, let's give a giant ribbon road style overhaul to this track. After starting the track, You go on an anti-gravity section into the deep jungle on a bridge that goes under golden arches. Then, after this, you exit the anti-gravity section and the next part is simply some calmer turns on Isles of the Lake until you then start to go on sand isles. You do some island hopping before going underwater. Here, you have to avoid falling into the abyss, but you can also perform a mushroom shortcut. However, if you're not careful, this ramp will take you back to the sand isle section. You then jump out of the water inside the volcano. There's a giant dry-boned corpse here, along with fire snakes you gotta avoid. You also have to avoid falling into the lava. You then glide towards the goal to end the lap. On the final lap, the track could also undergo a change. The weather turns from a bright sunny sky to overcast dark clouds, and the volcano erupts, turning the jungle into an ashy wasteland. The water mixes with lava, creating opportunities for more mushroom shortcuts. However, some of the lava also completely covers the water. Meteorites fall into the track and they explode into blazes of fire. Parts of it could even sink in the lava. This would be a great way to amp up the stakes after a more mundane DS Wario stadium, to have the player know that things are definitely getting harder now, so they can make GBA Lakeside Park feel like the point of no return before the big two, as I like to call them. You might be surprised by the next track, because it's gonna be 3DS Woohoo Mountain Loop.
Or 3DS Macau for America, fuck yeah.
Usually, the second to guest track is rather ominous or chaotic, but I noticed that with my retro tracks, I managed to complete a whole pattern with the penultimate track of my Lightning Cups that is always the fourth track of a Star Cup. GBA Bowser Castle 3 was the penultimate track in DS, SNES Bowser Castle 3 was the penultimate track in Mario Kart Wii, and DS Airship Fortress was obviously the penultimate in Mario Kart 7. And I think that this is the perfect opportunity to bring back a Woohoo track in Mario Kart 8, because Woohoo Mountain Loop is really epic and feels like a true final test of skills to see if you're worthy of overcoming Rainbow Road. I originally had it as the second track of the Lightning Cup, with GBA Bowser Castle 4 in this slot and GBA Lakeside Park as the Leaf Cup ender, but I just think the new order looks better overall. Plus, even though it's not a Bowser track, Woohoo Mountain Loop is actually quite epic enough to be a penultimate track, and if Rainbow Road was an option, it could even work as the final track overall. We don't even need to change it that much, because this course was already a fan favorite from the get-go, despite the fact that to this day, it's only available in Mario Kart 7 on the 3DS. But I'll still change two of the sections. Since the track cave section takes place in a volcano, I thought it would be logical to put lava in this part to make it feel more dangerous. Then, I added a ruined section with a giant loop-de-loop in anti-gravity, as there are the ruins you can see on the North on Woohoo Islands in Wii Sports Resort. Otherwise though, this track can be kept entirely intact, and I believe it will be a nice way of tying up here that we're now approaching the end of the retro selection and that it's gonna be an epic finale. If you remember what I said about my starter track pattern early in the video, you likely understood what the final track is gonna be. It's going to be GCN Rainbow Road. While N64 Rainbow Road got a very good remake, I already revamped it with a more space-themed remake in Mario Kart Wii's fixed retro section a couple of months ago, and since this is the base game we're talking about, I can't reuse tracks I already used in earlier video in this series. So GCN Rainbow Road it is. For me, when this Rainbow Road came out, it was the best one yet, and in a way, it was a crucial turning point for these types of tracks, because it finally ended up being the model that all Rainbow Road tracks would eventually follow. A celebratory and or epic atmosphere, colorful rainbow visuals, high speed, a lot of twists and turns, unique gimmicks you don't see anywhere else in the game, and a high difficulty. Plus, with Mario Kart 8's gimmicks, this course could be just gorgeous and would fulfill the role that the N64 Rainbow Road remake had, but even better. It could also make a great use of anti-gravity and gliding for an even more fun track. I hesitated to change this one, but I decided to give it a revamp as well because I thought it'd be underwhelming after all these overhauled tracks if the finale didn't have any changes. So first, you probably saw it coming, but almost all of the track will be in anti-gravity, as this allows for more dramatic turns and even going upside down in some parts, why not? The first section I'll change is the straightaway with a lot of speed boost as the start of a track after the first turn. Instead, I'll put a giant spinning barrel, like the one I put earlier in DK Summit. Just like that one, you can go around it to do loop-de-loops. However, this time, you have to be careful because I added gaping holes in the barrel, making it easier to fall off.
Duh, it's Rainbow Road. It is the road that you go. It's got a road, it's got a rainbow road. It's 20% cooler than the other tracks.
Then, I also made the second straightaway harder. I added a tight road
For him, this is a rainbow. Rigaboom was too lazy to actually make it rainbow colored.
with several twists and turns and split paths, making this part more brutal as well. Right after, the big champion will be turned into a glider section that goes directly upwards thanks to anti-gravity. You will have to avoid several flying meteorites by orienting your glider flight well. The end of the track with the final spiral stays the same. I think this glow up would be the perfect balance for a remake of Rainbow Road like this. It doesn't entirely change the track, as GCN Rainbow Road was amazing from the get go and could work even without a revamp, but it still has enough changes and profit from Mario Kart 8's new mechanics and to feel fresh so the finale doesn't become underwhelming. With this, we turned the Lightning Cup that was already pretty good but had suffered from weird priorities into one that has fan favorites and giant glow ups that team up perfectly for an amazing final impression. Perfect for the finale of the base game.
Don't fool yourself, Rigaboom. I know all the comments are gonna ask for booster course pass videos.
This video is now over. Among the 4 videos of this series, I think this one is the one I'm the most proud of, bar none. I'm really proud of the glow ups I gave to each track, and overall, I think I managed to find a good balance between fun tracks, tracks from various games, and revamps that I gave to cores that needed it the most. I hope you liked seeing those fixes too. Feel free to give me what your fixed version of Mario Kart DS, Wii, 7, and 8 retro selections are. I'll be happy to read them. As always, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Bye bye!
And it's not changed too much, but just enough so you still feel that you're